Welcome to our today's lesson. But before we start our lesson, I think we should start the word of prayer. For today, I will be leading with the word of prayer. But next lesson, Kenudia, you'll be the one who will lead us with the word of prayer. Okay, let's pray. Our Father Jesus Christ, we thank you for opportunity of seeing this day of today. We thank you, Father Jesus Christ, for the far we heard, Father Jesus Christ. Enable these students, Father Jesus, to get the knowledge that is going to be impacted onto their minds, Father Jesus Christ. Give them good health so that we can accomplish the requirements of the requirements of this unit. Father Jesus Christ, and the head of the all, we shall glorify thy holy name. It is the name of Jesus Christ I do pray and believe. Amen. Today, we are going to talk about a new topic. I'm going to introduce a new topic, that is constitution and constitution making. It is my hope that you will find the class or lesson enjoyable and intellectually fulfilling. So prepare yourself well. Welcome all. Well, in this topic, we shall look at constitution, the meaning of constitution, the meaning of the term constitution itself, the process of constitution making, you know, the types of constitution that exist in the world, but specifically we shall dwell on the two main types of constitution. That is written constitution and the last one, unwritten constitution. We shall also look at the characteristics of a good constitution, functions of a constitution, function of any country's constitution, specifically a Kenyan constitution. We shall also look at advantages of each type of constitution, that is a written constitution and unwritten constitution. We shall also look at the disadvantages of each of them and also characteristics of each of them. Also, we shall look at, or at the head of this lesson, you should be able to differentiate between the two types of constitution. Also remember, we shall look at we shall also look at some of the countries that have a written constitution and the countries that have an unwritten constitution. Thank you and welcome.
Well, as you can see, this is a sample, just a paper that is showing a Kenyan constitution. This constitution was promulgated or it was adopted in the year 2010. This is the constitution that brought about the devolution we currently have in our country. This is the constitution that brought up the developments actually. Now, constitution is a set of fundamental principles and laws established to govern and regulate the behavior of citizens of a particular state as they relate to each other in their daily activities, as well as regulating the conduct of people who are entrusted with the responsibility of managing the affairs of the states. A constitution also clarifies the duties and the rights of citizens, as well as the duties, rights, and responsibilities of the rulers or the people who are entrusted with the responsibility of governing a certain state or the state. Well, it also regulates the powers of the government by controlling the way it behaves as it manages the country's affairs. It doesn't mean that because the government of the day it's the current regime, sorry, has absolute powers to do whatever they want, to subject their subject, that is the citizens, to 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 every so what I'm trying to say is the constitution limits the way they operate. It also regulates the relationship between the government and the citizens of the states. It is the ones that shows the limits at the extent at which the citizens should approach the government and the scopes or the capacities at which the government of the day should operate. All right. So now, functions of a country's constitution, specifically Kenya. Well, one of the functions of the Kenyan constitution is that it clarifies the powers, duties, and responsibilities of those in powers, that is, the rulers or the governors, and the subjects. The subjects here being you and me, means this means the citizens of that state, that the citizens of the particular state. So the constitution clarifies the powers, the duties and responsibilities of those in powers, and also the subjects. Also remember, in a democratic country where democracy is being exercised, we all know, or that democracy, the democracies or the democratic government or societies says that the powers, the sovereign power, is vested on the citizens. So the citizens are the ones which has the very sovereign power compared to those who govern them. Remember, those who govern them, they are the ones installed by the citizens. So that's why we say the sovereign power resides to the people, because they have the responsibility, they have the capacity, they have the powers, maybe to install a certain person in the certain position. They can also remove any person in the position if they feels or if the needs arises, if the person doesn't serve to the capacity that the constitution has stipulated. Another function of a constitution is to protect the rights and the freedom of all citizens. We all know that under the constitution of Kenya, every person, every citizen is equal in the eyes of the constitution. No person, may it be the president, may it the prime minister, may it the premier, may it the cabinet minister, may it the governor, may it the who, everyone is treated equally in the presence or in the eyes of the constitution. Constitution stabilizes all this. None of anybody is above or superior than the other. If the rule of law applies to everyone, it doesn't matter who are you, whether you're in office or not. Another function of a country's constitution is to limit the powers of rulers who would attempt to oppress the subjects. It also limits the possibilities of the subject to insubordinate the rulers, and this is done by limiting some of their rights and the freedoms. For example, there was a scenario in the year 2018 brought about by this particular lawyer called Miguna, when he sworn in the then Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga as the people's president. We all knew that country had sworn in the legitimate president, that was President Uhuru Kenyatta. So by the virtue of swearing in, Amolo Odinga was contrary to the constitution, since Uhuru was sworn in as the president of the Republic of Kenya. But Miguna tried to subordinate the rulers or the regime of the then. That's why you saw he was exiled. Well, another function of a country's constitution, it enables a country to follow courses by spelling out the powers of the government. This helps to control the national instability. Another function is that a constitution defines and spells out the formal structure of government and the functions and the powers of each state organ. For example, the powers of the regional governments in relation to the central government. But in our case, remember, we have the county government, that is the devolution. We have the county government in relation to the national government. And also the powers and the duties of the executive, the legislature, and the judicial arm of the government. So the Constitution spells out, clearly defines the formal structures of these state organs of the government. For example, it is stated that the government should have three arms of government. It acknowledges that the legitimate governments have three arms of government. That is, the legislature, led by the lawmaking body, and the executive that implements the policies be passed by the legislature, and finally we have the judiciary, which interpret the law. It is represented by the Supreme Court, which is the highest supreme in the land, that is in Kenya. Well, these three arms of the government has capacity. The Constitution has stipulated the capacities of operations of each arm of the government. None of the said arms of the government is superior than the other. Therefore, they rely on each other for implementation of day-to-day activities. Well, there is a separation of powers among these three arms of the government, and also remember, they all work closely in a principle or in a process called, or in a principle, if you like to call it, called checks and balances, whereby each arm checks the operations of the other arm of the government, but doesn't do it in exaggeration or in a manner that will deem to derail its operation, to derail its operating, to derail its offering the services to the citizens. Therefore, there is a scope at which both of them operate, and they work closely hand in hand to each other. Another function of a constitution is it offers the legal framework from which the country's laws are made. It is from this constitution that all the laws of the land are derived in. They are based there. There's all the framework of each and every law that has to be made is as it has to come from the Constitution. The Constitution has laid down the framework under which the laws are made. As the last point, the function of the country's constitution, it also reflects the wishes of the people and their social, economic, political aspects. Those who draft the constitution doesn't just sleep and come up with a well-drafted constitution. No, they have to consider all these aspects of the Kenyan societies. They have to look at their social aspect, religious aspect, economic aspect, their technological aspirations, maybe political aspirations, and all these aspects, so that they can come up with the constitution that cuts across all these societies, so that no society can feel that it has been left behind from from the country, from the progress, from these processes. Characteristics of a good constitution. A good constitution must define and spells out clearly the structure of the government and the functions and the powers of each level and arm of government. We have already seen that under the functions of the constitution. Another characteristics of a good constitution is that the fundamental rights and the duties of all citizens must be clearly spelled out, and the way the right will be guaranteed specified. The roles and the powers of the specific rulers, such as the president, the prime ministers, must be stipulated under the constitution. Another point, the fourth point, is that the separation of powers of the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive must be clearly spelled out to avoid conflict of roles or conflict of interest of each arm of the government. We saw that, saying that they operate under the principle of checks and balances, where each arm of the governments checks the operations of the other governments, but does not do it in a manner that's deemed to derail its operations, its capacity to operate or offer services to the citizens, or operate according to the fundamental, according to the Constitution. The fifth point, the last characteristic, that the composition, functions, and the powers of all laws be enacted by Parliament must be made clear. And that is the characteristics of a good constitution. Thank you. There are various kinds of constitutions in the world. Some of them are democratic constitutions, and the others are undemocratic constitutions. These are also unitary or federal constitutions. We also have other types of constitutions. These are the written constitution and the unwritten constitution, and these are the two main constitutions widely known. The written constitution. Well, a written constitution is the one in which the basic principles and the laws are written down and are therefore available in one formal document. Examples of the countries with the written constitutions are, for example, in our case, in these countries, Kenya, we have a written constitution. The USA, United States of America, also have the written constitution. France also has the written constitution. And most of our neighboring countries like Tanzania, also they have a written constitution. Of a written constitution. One of the characteristics of a written constitution is that if an official volume it is an official volume that one can buy in order to study. That is the characteristics of a written constitution. It is in one volume, one official volume that one can buy. You can buy it yourself and read it. Another characteristic is that it is rigid and not easy to alter. An amendment is made using a procedure that is usually slow and cumbersome. We said that in this topic we are going to look at we're looking at constitution and the constitution making. Therefore, since it was written, the process of changing or amending that constitution, my friend, it's a bit cumbersome. It requires so many procedures. It has to go to referendum. It has to pass so many readings. It has to be asserted by the president for it to really pass as to be adopted as a new constitution. For example, as you can remember, if you had the knowledge, by then when 2010 constitution was being promulgated, it passed so many procedures. Therefore, that's why we see it is very rigid. The third characteristic of a written constitution is that it is usually simple, clear, and consistent. A special body of experts is therefore given the responsibility of drafting it using well-formulated procedures. These procedures are well stipulated and that the current constitution. Let's say, for example, we want to change this constitution. There are some, there are fundamental, there are framework well stipulated in this current constitution on how to come up or improve or amend a constitution. Therefore, all these frameworks are being laid down or spelled out by the constitution. Another characteristic of a written constitution is that it spells out the fundamental rights and the freedom of the citizens. To ensure this is accomplished, the draft constitution is taken to the legislature for approval. It has to pass so many procedures for it to be approved. In some written constitution, rules are found in traditions. Some of them are based on conventions and the customs of the people. A written constitution is prepared in such a way that one can be able to compare the actions and the day-to-day activities of the government with what is written and expected to be achieved and maintained. So if the responsibilities, the powers, the duties of the government are stipulated in this written constitution, therefore any person can compare what the government of the day has delivered. Is it really in standard of what has been written in the constitution, since it has been written? So that comparisons can be very simple, and following the actions of the government may seem to be very easy. And that is the characteristics of a written constitution. Of a written constitution. Once prepared, it is not easy to change or amend. It is so as to favor particular personalities in power. So once it has been once it has been prepared, it is not easy to change or amend so as to favor a particular persons in power. No. Also, the citizens has to be, involved in passing it, maybe at the stage of a referendum. They may decide if it is good for it to be passed, no or not. Then they can't pass it at the referendum level. Another advantage is that it becomes easy for the illiterate to know the expectations of the government because they buy the official copies and read themselves. This is because it is readily available for reference and use. So we are saying here, what we are trying to say here is that those people who can be able to know, as you know, the majority of Kenyans now are the illiterate. There are illiterates. So therefore, they can be able to purchase the copies as they are available for referencing and use. Therefore, they can know what the government has done and what government has not done and what must be done by the government. Another advantage is that no individual can alter or manipulate any part of the written constitution. The legislative body is the one which has the right of making even a minor amendment or alteration. So it is the only legislative arm of the government that has the capacity to amend even for a single or a minor amendment or alteration. The further advantage of a written constitution is that the legislatures and the delegates are able to incorporate the traditions, conventions, and the customs of the citizens into a written constitution, which is people driven and which recognizes people's ethnic groupings. Another advantage is that a well-written and accepted constitution can play the role of uniting all the people in a nation. A written constitution provides a smooth procedure of handing over power over generations, death of rulers, or resignations. This is because it provides a clear guideline of what should be done if such a thing happens or such a case arises. Another advantage is that a well-written constitution enables a country to operate in a favorable and orderly manner. The last big advantage of a written constitution is that a written constitution spells out the fundamental rights of citizens very clearly, therefore making them, aware of their rights, and also making them have a reference when their rights are infringed. So that is the advantages of a written constitution. One, it is too rigid to be easily altered without a lot of consultations. So there must be a lot of consultations for it to be tampered or changed or altered. Amending the second disadvantage is that amending a constitution is slow and cumbersome. Since we are saying this is slow and cumbersome because it has to pass so many or to follow so many procedures. There are so many laid down procedures processes that it has to cut across for it to be changed or tampered or amended. The third disadvantage is that the language used to write the constitution volume is difficult for people who have not learned the disciplines such as laws. Some English, not some English, but some vocabularies used there may deem to be very complicated to people who are not, taking some disciplines such as laws. Yet, it becomes difficult to simplify without altering the meaning and the stress. Those are the vocabularies used to write the document, that is the constitution, sometimes becomes very complicated or very complex in such a way that if you are not doing discipline, law discipline related, a professional, it is a very difficulty for you, maybe even for those who are amending the constitution, uh, uh, you know, uh, they sometimes alter the meaning and the stress. Yeah. The further disadvantage is that if the constitution is not properly formulated, it can make various arms of the government conflict. That is why we saw or said a constitution stipulates or spells out very clearly each arms of the government functions and how each arm of the government should relate with each other. Initially we saw that they operate under the principle we called as the principle of checks and balance, where each of them has to know its responsibilities, duties, rights, and scopes of work, the capacity of operation. Therefore, if the constitution is not properly formulated, if it's not properly formulated, it can cause the conflicts of these arms of the government. The fifth disadvantage is that for a good lasting written constitution, very qualified experts are required. This may not be available in some countries. There are some countries that don't have very much, the very much experts of, who can make these changes without, that is one of them. Because sometimes you can see there are not enough maybe experts to deal with the constitution or the matters pertaining to the constitution. Well, the last disadvantage of a written constitution is that the constitution making process is costly and very involving if all the procedures are followed to the dot. If you can remember, there was a bill that was brought about by the former president of the Republic of Kenya, the fourth actually president of the Republic of Kenya, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the building bridges initiative. It was deemed to change the constitution, but it was rejected by the people since it was very heavy, it was very burdened to the citizens. Therefore, they felt it was not cool at all, uh, you know, to pass it because it was very costly. By then, it costed around 13 billion and it was not yet passed. Constitution. Now we've looked at the written constitution. Now let's look at the unwritten constitution. What is the meaning of unwritten constitution? At the end of today, you should be able to define the meaning of constitution, characteristics of a good constitution, functions of a constitution, advantages of a written constitution, and its disadvantages, and also characteristics of unwritten constitution. Let's now look at the unwritten constitution. This type of constitution, is the one which does not exist in a single formal official document. Britain, for example, is an example of the country with the unwritten constitution. The sources of the British constitutions are the Acts of Parliament, the British Conventions, the acts and legal publications by reputable authorities, decisions made by the British law courts from time to time, and the royal prerogative of the king or queen to declare war or make treaties of peace. So almost very different from the written constitution, where we saw it is the constitution exists in one formal document, but in unwritten constitution we saw it exists in various sources. Constitution. One, it is easy to make amendments in order to cope with the prevailing situations or prevailing circumstances. The second advantage is that it is not rigid as per the written constitution. Therefore, it can be altered without a lot of consultations because it doesn't require so many tedious procedures for it to be amended. Another advantage is that this constitution is long-lasting because it is native and therefore acceptable by the majority. That is the advantages of unwritten constitution. One, the fundamental rights of citizens are